There's a world
I don't
where
know.
Wicked actually sweeps even the technical categories over Dune 2.
That's crazy.
Because Dune 2's been pretty far removed now from earlier in the
No.
year.
Hello, and welcome back to the Fifth Star. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Albert.
And this is a podcast where we're trying to find our next 5-star movie. And when we find our next 5-star movie, this podcast will melt away.
So on this episode, we're reviewing Wicked.
Yes.
And Wicked is based on the musical. And it is a reimagining of the origin story of the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz. So we both wrote down what we gave it secretly, and we will now guess each other's score. I'm going to guess that you love since you love musicals, that you gave this a 4.0 out of 5.
Okay. I was going to guess you gave it a 3.5.
Okay, 3.5. And Jamie, we will reveal our scores after we give our initial thoughts, and then we'll get into spoilers. But what did you think of Wicked, the musical turned into a movie?
I really enjoyed it.
Of course you did. Did you enjoy 4.0 or 5.0? That's the question.
I really went into it thinking this could be a complete disaster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you know, I saw it on Broadway last fall, and it was the first time I had actually seen it, but I grew up with the soundtrack and, just had never had the opportunity to see it really. I've been waiting forever for them to adapt this into a movie because I feel like out of most musicals, this one is the most movie-esque.
Yeah, I mean, it's based on a movie, right?
Yeah,
which was based on a
that's true.
book, but the original Wizard of Oz was such a big point in
Yeah,
cinema, like the
it's huge.
introduction of color and all that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Like a huge blockbuster at the time.
Mhm.
It's kind of insane that it took them this long because the musical came out over a decade ago.
I think it's been almost
And
20 years.
Has it been almost 20?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Because it came out in 2003 or 2004.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I thought
it's
it
been
came
20
out.
years.
Wow. Okay, yeah. All the world building and all the design, and there's so much lore to it that I do remember when I watched the musical on stage, I was like, dang, there's a lot happening and they're really just moving through it.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get a chance to really unpack a lot of what was going on in the characters. I almost felt like, should I read the book, to really get the full grasp of what was going on. So I actually liked that this movie stretched a lot of that out. It really gave us more time to see how magic works, where the wizard came from, and and the whole animals, the whole meeting that they have, that's not in the stage play. So
Oh, okay. Yeah. After I watched this movie, I was a little interested about what the differences were between movie and the musical.
Didn't you see it?
I did see the musical. I actually watched it when it first opened.
So you saw
Idina
Menzel?
So I saw it with the original cast, yeah.
I'm so jealous.
Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth, right?
Wow.
But
insane.
I didn't know who they were back then.
Right, they were kind of known names.
Yeah, because it was before
time.
Frozen, and and so I was impressed with their singing and all that, and I really liked the idea and the concept of this kind of origin story of a villain and how they didn't really start off bad.
Wow.
And that was original, I thought. I remember it being an original idea back then, and then came all the Maleficent and the Corellas, and so that kind of became a trope afterwards because of the influence of Wicked. So I do remember liking those aspects of it. When I did see it, though, I didn't remember it being this is one of my favorite musicals of all time.
Yeah.
Because I'm still a bigger fan of Phantom of the Opera and Rent and some other musicals.
Yeah.
So it didn't quite live up to that level, but I was really impressed with it. So going into the movie, I mean, I've listened to the soundtrack a few times over the past 20 years, but it's been a long time. Only song I remembered was Defying Gravity.
Defying Gravity, yeah.
And I didn't remember how the story was structured. I didn't really remember much of the story at all.
Yeah.
So the title credit opens and it says Wicked Part 1.
You didn't know it was a
and
part
I didn't
one?
know it was going to be a part 1.
I thought I told you. Okay.
I don't remember if you did or
Maybe I
not,
didn't.
but it also wasn't marketed that way. All the marketing, it says Wicked.
Wow.
It never says Wicked Part 1.
When they first announced it, Although I guess that was more of a niche audience. When they
Mm.
first announced it, they said they were doing 2 parts.
Oh, okay. So then I saw it on the title card and I was like, okay, it's going to be part 1. And then as I started watching it, I think I was a little underwhelmed by it
Okay.
overall.
I had a feeling. I had
Yeah,
a feeling.
first of all, it's a really long movie. This movie is part 1, 2 hours and 40 minutes. The whole musical itself on Broadway is 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So by the end of the movie, I'm thinking, my goodness, this is as long as the musical was, and we're only halfway through the story. So I guess for you that really worked because they fleshed out things that they ran over really quickly in the musical.
The musical, you don't have time to really like understand what's going on. I'm especially curious because the second act is even more confusing.
Oh,
Like they really quickly just like set something up and then move on. And it's like, whoa, wait, what just happened?
So the movie
Without
part 2
spoiling.
next year might end up being like a 3.5 hour movie.
Maybe because
Oh, no.
like without spoiling anything, in the musical there's like a character, something happens to them, they quickly explain it, and then they move on.
Oh.
And it's like, wait. What? Let's go back a few steps here. How did that happen? I want to see that happen.
Okay.
You know? So I do think there's some stuff that they just had to very, very quickly skip over in the musical. That was my only complaint, really, with the stage musical. Was I was like, I felt like it was too fast. I needed more time.
So this first part, it never felt like a drag for you? I mean, it's so long.
The dance, the whole ballroom scene at the Ozdas Ballroom, it's very drawn out. I felt like that scene was super long. And maybe that's because I knew what was going to happen, that I was like, okay, just make that part happen now, please. Because staying in this moment way too long. So there were a couple of those. But I liked the filler scenes that they added.
Okay.
Like they added a ton of little scenes that just kind of showed the school more and fleshed out the characters
so the
really
musical,
nicely.
like that whole stuff in the school is not that long?
No. Like basically she shows up for school and then they do the whole, you know, Glinda and Elphaba meeting, and it's like, you know, a bad time. And then she reveals that she can do magic, and then Madame Horrible's like, oh my gosh, you're my student now. That's like the first, you know, 10, 15 minutes. And then it kind of moves on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing with Dr. Dillamon is very glossed over, I feel like.
Okay.
Like he gets his whole song, but that's when you first meet him. It's like he immediately goes into his song, and that was another part. In the stage play, he's in a costume, and so all of his scenes felt really comedic to me.
Oh, okay.
And in the movie, because he's like an actual goat, I was like, I'm like actually gonna cry right now. I'm like actually feeling really terrible for this poor goat.
And the CG was pretty good, I thought, with the goat.
It was decent, yeah.
It wasn't distracting. He was definitely a believable character, I thought.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind that whole fleshing out of that because that is the main plot.
Yeah.
And they do connect that throughout this first part and kind of bring it to some kind of arc.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind that part of it. Maybe it was all the stuff at the school. You have not only Elphaba and Glinda, but all of Glinda's friends and the whole kind of school popularity versus the new girl, like all that dynamic and trope kind of playing out.
Yeah.
Almost like a whole other movie in and of itself. And then you have the love interest and you have all these characters that, I mean, part of me was thinking, okay, so you have the love interest, but it never gets fully fleshed out. And I guess because it's the first part. And so then that feels like it's all just there and it's kind of just dragging the story out. And then you have the sister, and I don't really know what the point of that is. And then you have, I don't know, it just seems like there's all these different pieces to the story that are, and each part gets its own kind of feature song, and it's kind of like a setup, but you don't really see it come to fruition yet.
Interesting.
I think all that kind of stuff just felt really long. And I think there was another part of it that I was just kind of never fully taken or impressed by anything. Like I will say some of the highlights were, there was general good production value.
Yeah.
But the only one that really stood out was the library scene.
Oh, the library scene was so cool.
So that was really well done.
The production design, the choreography.
Yeah, so that was well done, and I thought that really did stand out.
Yeah.
The rest of it was just okay. I mean, the World of Oz and Emerald City and all that, it just kind of seemed like what you would expect. Like nothing really like popped out or kind of surprised me.
I really loved the world building of the Emerald City, though.
Okay.
Because that's another thing. In the stage musical, it's just like green. The stage is like green.
Okay.
They don't have like all that set.
You don't have the buildings and all that.
Yeah, it's not like as crazy. It's more of like a backdrop type of thing. And so it's like, you know, one short day in the Emerald City.
Oh my God, that song's been stuck in my head because after I watched the movie, I went through the soundtrack to see, what was the original musical like? How much did they give away in the movie? And then some of those few songs, especially Defying Gravity, but the One Sweet Day has just been stuck in my One Short Day. Is that what it was? Oh, I've been singing the wrong lyrics the whole time in my car. But yeah, it's just so catchy.
But like they were really able to show how big the Emerald City was. Like the spectacle of it is something that you like can't quite replicate for a stage show.
Okay.
Simply because of, time and literal physical objects, moving around. So I felt like Emerald City was just really fun. It was all the costumes, the hair. It was like, this is cool too because it kind of like emanates the Wizard of Oz a little bit, except obviously it's quite updated.
It definitely had that vibe from the original. But I guess at this point, we've seen that. We've seen Willy Wonka, a few different versions of that.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of different kinds of musicals that have this very colorful world, fantastic world with, these big choruses of people dancing.
Right.
And so nothing really felt different from that for me.
I think that
which maybe is unfair because the musical's been around for it's been around for 20 years.
Right. It actually predated a lot of
things that we would
musicals.
see later.
Yeah. And I think it stayed true to its original, intent.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like they changed too much at all.
Which you thought was a good thing.
Yeah. And I thought, like, Glinda, let's talk about Ariana Grande.
Okay.
I thought she killed it.
I agree.
And I really thought she wasn't going to do a good job.
I totally
did not
agree.
believe in her.
Because you think, you hear Ariana Grande being cast and you're thinking, this is just to get people in the seats.
Yeah.
And she's not going to be I mean, you kind of expected she might be an okay singer, obviously, but you didn't think the acting was going to be great.
I didn't think the acting was going to be great.
She was, I would say, other than the library scene, in terms of production value, the only other real standout for this whole movie was Glinda and Ariana Grande's performance.
She was so good.
Yeah, not only her singing, which was fantastic, but also her acting. And she brought all the lightheartedness, the fun, the comedic stuff.
Yes.
I mean, she carried this movie.
What I loved about her is that she really like channeled Kristen Chenoweth, the original Glinda.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I felt like she brought her own uniqueness to it as well. I mean, Glinda is kind of dumb, but she wasn't as much of an airhead. So I felt like Ariana kind of brought like an airheadedness to her.
And the other part...
And it suited it.
Yeah, and the other part is she's obviously really rich and spoiled.
Yeah.
And and she's super entitled, the Glinda character. And she played it so convincingly that I was just thinking, this is just who Ariana Grande is in real life, right? Like, she's just playing herself, right? And I don't know if she really is or not. And I didn't get into the whole, like, stuff about the hate people were giving her before the movie about her personal life, and I don't think that stuff should really factor in. So I was just watching it for what she was doing on screen, and it was just so convincing. She was great.
Her comedic timing was really good. She had the vocal quality that we needed. I mean, she started on Broadway. That was her first thing.
Wow.
She was in a musical called 13, and I think she was like 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah.
And so her roots are very much in musical theater, and I get so sick of movie musicals where they just cast like people who can't sing. Like, that was my biggest pet peeve with the Les Mis movie, is they just cast big name actors that like couldn't sing that well, and I'm like, just cast Broadway people.
Yeah.
They're actually good at acting.
Yeah.
So I was worried that she wouldn't, be able to channel that inner Broadway self, but I feel like she did.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was
she really saved this movie for me.
Interesting.
If it wasn't for her, I think I would have been really down on this movie.
Dang.
But every time she was on screen, it kind of drew me back in. All her numbers, she just killed it. And yeah.
So you didn't like Cynthia Erivo?
So that's my thing. I was thinking that
I'm kind of shocked.
Yeah. I didn't really think that Cynthia Erivo kind of matched what Ariana Grande was bringing. And the song that really did it was, what's the song? The Loathe song?
Where Loathing?
The duet. So that, when they did that duet, basically it's just all Ariana Grande doing her thing. And Cynthia Erivo, whenever she's singing, like, first of all, it didn't even sound like there was much of a harmony, which later when I listened to the soundtrack, that harmony from Idina Menzel is like really good and clear and strong, because Idina Menzel is just such a powerful voice.
Yeah.
And Cynthia Erivo, like, I really thought, like, I've seen a couple of her movies, but I don't really know her that well.
Yeah.
And I didn't think she was a singer from this movie. And only later, looking it up, did I realize, oh, she's actually been on Broadway and she's won Tonys and stuff like that. But
she's only one award away from an EGOT.
Wow. I just was really unimpressed by her vocal performance.
That shocks me because she's actually my favorite singer in the world.
Did you think that? And the thing is, like,
I'm not saying anything about like her character or her personhood. I don't really know much about her.
Yeah.
But her voice, to me, is like one of the best voices in the world.
And I think she has a good voice, but whenever she's singing in her solos or doing a duet with Ariana Grande, I thought it just was very like muted and really reserved. And when I listened to the soundtrack again, Idina Menzel isn't like that. Like, she has that power. She brings the kind of range. And I mean, in this movie, you really never hear her ever kind of go for it, except for just one
Gravity.
moment. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like, by then I was just,
I was thinking about this, and I was actually talking to my friend who watched it with me, and I was telling her the same thing with Wizard and I was like, it was frustrating because the whole first part of Wizard and I, it felt like she was singing in her head, like through her nose, which is like a technique that you use when you're trying to keep your voice small.
Oh.
However, it's kind of sounded like she was just singing very nasally, and I didn't really like it. And I was like, it's not really showing her true talent because her voice is very clear normally. And so I was frustrated. She didn't open up until the very last stanza.
Yeah.
And you can hear it. You can hear the vocal change where it goes from her head to her chest. And it sounds so much better. And I was telling my friend, like, it was frustrating that she did it that way. But my friend was like, I think it was very intentional because Elphaba doesn't know who she is yet as a character, and she is very small and insecure. I know, I kind of agree with you. But she comes into her own in a vocal way through singing the song, where she starts off small, nasally, in her head, not quite open, and then at the end she opens up, and that's like her epiphany, unlimited. And then she goes into the whole, Defying Gravity song completely open the whole time. And so I was like, okay, as a character choice, that is really good. That's really interesting. However, I am still disappointed that it didn't sound that great.
Yes, because
and that is a bummer.
It was to the point that when she really starts to let go in the end, Defying Gravity, I thought that it was dubbed. I thought it was someone else covering and singing for her.
No, that's definitely her.
I was like, the person who's been singing this whole movie cannot do what I'm hearing now. And
she's got an insane range.
I totally thought maybe they're mixing in Ariana Grande doubling for her or something. I thought there was some kind of thing being done in post, because
no, she can actually do that. You can
which
hear
is
her
even
live.
More frustrating, because why be like that? And okay, I can understand that motivation in terms of a character.
Yeah.
But you can still have power and still be reserved. Like, you hear great singers like Adele do it, and where you can still have that. And I think in the original soundtrack with Idina Menzel, that's
Yeah.
what she's doing. She has power. She still had moments where she kind of lets it out a little bit, even though it's like her songs in the first half are definitely not as kind of epic as Kristen Chenoweth's,
Yeah.
Glinda's songs.
Yeah.
But you still hear it there. You still hear that power, and you still kind of
And you do have to project
yes
for a stage production.
and
yeah.
maybe that's why. This is, I think, something that I'm noticing about musicals in movie format that kind of bothers me. When you watch a musical, I think more important than the story, what you're watching a musical for is great vocal performances and dancing performances.
Yeah.
That is what original musicals were always built on.
Right.
The story was just there as a means to an end, right?
That's fair.
To get from one song to the next. I think we've kind of shifted into this phase where, and maybe La La Land was part of this, maybe it came a little before that, where the acting and the story takes prominence, and then we just kind of sprinkle in some songs and things like that. And I think that's a real disservice to the expectations of an audience member who's coming in to see a musical. And the same thing when you go to a Broadway show.
Yeah.
I think the thing that you walk away is, wow, those voices, their ability to dance and sing, and that's what really like leaves you just in awe.
Here's
right?
the thing, though.
Even though the story was really brushed over, like in the original musical, right?
You bring up Singing in the Rain, though, and I know that's in your top 10, right?
Yeah. No, it's not in my top 10.
Oh.
But
it's just your favorite musical?
It's
movie?
One of my favorite musicals, yeah.
I feel like that's interesting because they clearly were, singing more in their head for those recordings. Debbie Reynolds, her voice is incredibly like more in her head, kind of more nasally.
Yeah.
She doesn't project as much. She still has a great voice, but she's clearly not, open in the same way that like the problem with Cynthia Erivo you were having.
Yeah. And
so it's interesting.
Well, but it's because I think Debbie Reynolds wasn't a trained singer.
Yeah, she was.
She was?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. So I know she wasn't a trained dancer. And Gene Kelly really put her through her paces. It was almost like torture or boot camp for her to get to that point. And the songs, I think the songs are just really well written. Like Good Morning and just all the songs are just really well written. And it's not so much the vocal quality and performance, but it's just an amazing story. And the dances, the choreography were just so good.
Yeah.
In this movie, I mean, I think Ariana Grande killed it with the dancing.
Yeah.
She was really, really good. But the choreography itself wasn't anything supernaturally amazing. It was just kind of the normal, typical type of
other than
musical
Dancing
thing.
Through Life.
Yeah, that's the one
library.
in the library. Yeah, that was really well choreographed with the books and stuff like that. And the set. So that one did stand out.
And Fiyero was so good.
He was good. Yeah, he was a good dancer.
He was so smooth.
But I think for this movie, what we're wanting is the Idina Menzel, Kristen Chenoweth type of vocal quality. And I think Ariana Grande brought that. But Cynthia Erivo just is kind of a letdown. And
I think you're in the minority.
And
I think you're in the minority.
She totally gets washed out vocally. And even her performance, I thought she was good, but I don't know. I didn't really super connect with the Elphaba character. I was just kind of watching her go through her thing, her journey, but I was never really moved by her. I was always waiting for something to really pop and get me excited. And maybe it's because I'm not a huge original Wicked fan.
Maybe.
That might be why.
You're also not like a huge musical person.
I'm
like
not.
You do like musicals, but you're not like, I'm going to watch every musical.
Yeah. I think if there's a really good musical, I think I can appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah.
But you're right. I don't go seeking musicals.
Yeah.
I'm never like, oh, I can't wait to watch this because it looks like a great musical. Yeah. And so I was a little let down.
Okay.
Yeah. But Ariana Grande, she deserves all the love and all the flowers for sure. I mean, they're talking about she might get nominated. I think she's getting nominated in Best Supporting Actress. Is the way they're kind of pushing her.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, because they're trying to split and not have them compete in the same category. But there's some talk of that. And there's also talk, which I thought was interesting, is Wicked is gaining a lot of steam as a Best Picture winner potentially.
Whoa.
Yeah, and one interesting reason why they're kind of saying that is because before the elections, there wasn't really a lot of hype about Wicked. I mean, everyone knew it was on the calendar and everything, but I guess people weren't as excited about it. But the thought is there's no real strong contender, and all the other contenders, like Honora and Emilia
Dune Part
Perez,
2.
and well, not really. Dune Part 2 is probably gonna nominate, but it's not really in the discussion. It's like Brutalist. So it's all these kind of, indie and kind of artsy, those type of films, like nothing really popular and commercial.
Popular.
Yeah. And then after the elections, a lot of Hollywood kind of being really disappointed with how it turned out. It seems like there are a lot of people who are just wanting this kind of comfort movie. And without any real strong, especially mainstream contenders, Wicked is kind of filling that void, which is kind of interesting.
It is a very joyful movie.
Yeah, it's all about just kind of having a good time and
Yeah.
reminding people like the magic of cinema in a way, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's something potentially real about this Wicked potentially being the Best Picture winner. And if it does win, it would kind of be a little bit of a callback to a few decades ago where the big blockbusters won.
I don't think it deserves Best Picture.
There's a world
I don't
where
know.
Wicked actually sweeps even the technical categories over Dune 2.
That's crazy.
Because Dune 2's been pretty far removed now from
No.
earlier in the year. And I agree.
Nobody's forgotten it, though.
I know, I agree, but there's a lot of momentum right now, and it's getting really close. We'll see how it does at the Golden Globes, but because there's even talk about, we have to fit Ariana Grande back into the schedule so that she can have a big performance, and to get people to even tune in to these awards.
Oh, that's cool. They might do an Oscar performance.
Yeah, and people will tune in just for that because of
I
like
would
the
love
hype
to
behind.
see it.
You see, so I don't know. This might potentially make a lot of moves in the next few months.
I did see on Letterboxd the curve is insane. It's not even a curve; it's a cliff, and it's average 5 stars,
which I don't agree with. The only way I can explain that.
You gotta show me.
The only way I can explain that is that it broke box office records, right?
Yeah.
120 million opening weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the Wicked fans, I think, just coming out, and of course they're going to be maybe a little biased. So I think that's probably inflating it.
It did do exactly what it told us it was going to do. It was marketed way, and it delivered the way it was marketed.
Except for the part one. That was a little...
Okay, that's fair.
A little deceptive, I thought.
But we knew it was going to be a really colorful, fantastical, happy musical for the most part. Mm-hmm. And it delivered on that. And it was for like a wide range of audience, from kids to adults. And I think it accomplished the goal that it was trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So based on that, I am not surprised so much about the Letterboxd.
Okay.
Movies.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see what we gave it.
Let's see what you got.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go first then. You guess I'll give it a 3.5, and I give it a 3. Yeah.
I had a feeling, but I was like, it's not an average movie.
I actually was almost gonna go to a 2.5 at one point because I was it just kept dragging, and I was but then every time Ariana Grande was on screen singing or dancing, I was like, I can't give this below average.
This is not an average movie.
Okay, I guess the 4.0.
Give it a 4
yeah, okay.
And a heart.
Wait, so why did you not give it a 4.5 then?
Because like,
and this is out of 5 stars.
So this is what lowered it for me. And now we can go into spoilers.
Okay.
What lowered it for me was the use of CGI. I thought some of the CGI choices were really weird. And okay, mainly one of my biggest pet peeves was that stupid frog in Wizard and I that she's like looking at her reflection, and then that stupid frog comes out. And I'm like, that probably cost them like 10 grand to animate that dumb frog. And then...
But all these sets were built for real.
Yeah. A lot of the sets were real, but there still was like a lot of CGI, like background and everything.
Okay.
All of like the Defying Gravity song, I felt like a lot of that was CGI, and it was weird.
Like when she's flying around.
When she's flying on the broom, that like looked kind of weird.
Yeah.
I get what they were going for, but it took me out of it a little bit.
Okay.
My other pet peeve.
Okay.
My other pet peeve was actually the Oz Dust Ballroom it felt like a Disney set, like a Disney Channel original movie.
Yeah, it kind of had that feeling a little bit.
Like the set looked kind of lame,
almost like a school play made it.
Yeah, and then the costumes were like just okay compared to the rest of the movie. Like I loved the costumes, but for the ballroom scene, I felt like the costumes were really lacking. Like they just looked kind of like a Disney Channel original movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also stretched that scene out like so long.
I actually didn't mind that much because, again, not remembering the story.
Yeah.
I saw it as a twist when they become friends through that whole thing.
I think, okay, yeah.
But
maybe for me it felt
really
stretched out because I knew it was coming and they just like kept drawing it out. And I was like, okay, she's supposed to dance with her now. Like, what's going on?
Because she's doing the dance by herself awkwardly, like for a while.
When she does that,
it is done really like over a long amount of time.
I did like get really teary eyed.
Oh,
I got super teary eyed when they were like dancing together, and you see like Elphaba's face, and she's like, "This has never happened to me before. Never in my life has someone like stood up for me like this." Mm-hmm. It was such a touching moment of, for once, she wasn't alone. Mm-hmm. And she was so used to that she had like just built this really hard shell. Mm-hmm. And it's not until Glinda does it with her that shell starts to kind of like melt away. Yeah. Literally, she starts crying. It's like melting away. Yeah. And that moment was captured so beautifully because you can't really emulate that in a stage show. You can't like see their expressions like that.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And so for the moment in the stage show, I was like, this is kind of awkward. And it wasn't until after they were done and like everyone else started joining in that I was like, that was actually sweet what Glinda did. Okay, that was actually sweet of her. But I didn't think of it as sweet at the beginning. Yeah. I just thought it was kind of awkward and weird. But the movie made it so touching that I was very impressed by that bit.
And I did think the movie did a good job of making Ariana feel really bad about having made her wear this costume when she just finds out from the professor
that she gets the wand.
Yeah. And so that part really did kind of strike me as, oh man, she really does feel so guilty.
Yeah.
And then so it really does motivate her turn when she kind of doesn't want to see her embarrass herself and, puts her kind of her personal clout on the line for her.
And then the scene right after, like right before Popular, when they like reveal their secrets or whatever, that was, I feel like, almost word for word from the stage play.
Okay.
Like that scene. And I thought they both did such a good job of like keeping it light, but also not making light of the trauma that she's kind of conveying. And Glinda, she just killed that moment too, because she was able to be really sympathetic, but then also make a joke. And it didn't feel like it cheapened the moment. And then, she did Popular, and Popular was like so good.
Yeah. But again, in those sequences, Ariana Grande is just killing it with the acting and the songs. And Cynthia Erivo is just kind of there, it felt
That's how she is in the stage play, too.
Okay.
Elphaba's very, like, she barely moves.
Man.
She's so, like, still for a lot of it. And that's why Defying Gravity is such a huge moment, because it's her finally, like, just
letting go.
I'm just gonna be,
And so maybe that's what was working against it for me, where this first half is really Glinda's movie.
Yeah.
And then Elphaba's just kind of there, and then she's going to really soar and take over in the second half.
Yeah.
But for this movie, I just felt like she was almost like background. And even her vocals and, her acting, everything just seemed really muted. And so,
well, I think this movie
really connect with her.
That's fair. What I think this movie did well, though, and it's like really, really hard to do from a writing standpoint, is have two main characters that both arc in a way that they like almost cross over each other. Oh man, maybe this is a 4.5. Like, I was worried too when I saw that they were doing a two-parter, because I was like, how are they gonna make it like a nice storyline? But ending it with Defying Gravity, and that's where intermission is.
Yeah.
is so perfect because you see how Glinda and Elphaba had to make a choice in that moment. And they both chose different paths, but both paths like make sense according to their arcs from the movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you make two protagonists that like both can arc but also both carry the plot forward? It's really hard to do.
Yeah, because usually it's just focused on one, and everyone else serves that protagonist's arc.
And
yeah,
arguably,
right.
Elphaba is more of the main character because she is like center stage. But
I mean, this is meant to be her story, right?
Yeah, but Glinda is such a huge part of it.
Yeah.
That it makes sense that they're kind of both main characters. Yeah.
And I do think it makes sense because it's set up, and I don't know if the play was this way, but this is really told through Glinda telling us this whole backstory.
Yeah, that's how the stage play is. Yeah.
So then it makes sense that she's such a big prominent part of it. I think if Cynthia Erivo, her singing was more matched with what Ariana Grande was doing, I would have really liked this a lot more. But
you don't think she killed Defying Gravity?
I thought, again, when she did that, it sounded fake to me because I did not believe from everything else she had done up to that point.
But now that you know that it actually is her and it's real.
That moment, that one moment when she hits the note, right? Which is kind of a renowned moment with this musical, I guess, right? It was impressive, and I did kind of perk up a little bit. I didn't mind the whole CG, her flying around thing that much.
Okay.
It felt like a proper finale, I guess.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind that. I liked the song. But even in the build-up of the first part of the song, listening again to the original soundtrack, in the original, Idina Menzel, like, as is building, like, is really bringing it. But for me, Cynthia Erivo, like, until she hits that note, I still felt like it was kind of muted and kind of dull, her singing. And I think maybe because of that, I just never really got that excited about her as a character.
Yeah.
Whereas Ariana Grande, because of how just amazing her performance was vocally and her dancing, and she was really funny. Like, I was in a packed theater, and every time she was being funny, like, everyone laughed out loud.
Right.
And so
same with my experience.
Yeah. And so I think she just really overshadowed.
It was funny though. There was a
character.
lady next to me. She was definitely older than me. But she was leaning forward in her seat almost the whole time. And when Defying Gravity started, I could like see her in my peripheral vision mouthing all the lyrics and like kind of like moving her head. And I could tell like, oh my gosh, she's like a super fan.
Yeah.
Which on the one hand was really distracting and I was kind of irritated by it. But on the other hand, I was like, she's being moved by this, you know? And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
It's cool that the movie, the reason I wanted them to make it into a movie for so long is because of the accessibility. Like, yeah, this show's been running forever in New York, but like you can only see it if you like go to New York or live in New York.
Yeah.
And then you could potentially watch the tour if it comes to where you live. But my friend who watched it with me had never seen the stage play before, but she knew all the songs because she had listened to the soundtrack. She was so emotional when the movie was over.
Wow.
And she was like, this was so good, and I'm so happy that I got to see it. And so that really hit me of like, this should be a musical that people can see and have access to.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they made it. No,
I agree. I think that's a fair point. And that is great that, you know, giving people access to that experience. That's wonderful. I think this conversation makes me realize who this movie really is made for. This movie is made for people who already love the music. And they already know the music.
Yeah, you're right.
I think for me, having seen the musical 20 years ago, but not having kept up with the music, and like a lot of these songs were new to me.
Yeah.
Like I had remembered Defying Gravity and a little bit of Popular Girl or Popular, but the rest of it was all new. Like I was hearing it for the first time, and so I didn't appreciate it as much, I think, because of that.
Maybe.
And I think you have to kind of really love the music and know the music for you to really get the full experience out of this movie.
Yeah, maybe so.
If you're like a new viewer, never heard the music, never watched the musical, I don't know that you're going to really super enjoy it or that this is going to win you over.
Maybe.
I think you have to just see it live on stage for you to be really blown away by the vocal experience of it.
I'd be curious to hear a person's commentary.
So my wife, I watched this with my wife, and she's seen the musical and she really loves the musical. Now I don't think she remembers all the songs and stuff.
Okay.
But she liked this movie even less than me.
Oh, wow.
She was just bored throughout this movie.
Oh, that's shocking.
Yeah, and I think that runtime is a killer. It really hurt. It's the Achilles heel of this movie. I think if it was just under 2 hours, like 1 hour and 50 minutes, man, this movie could have really been great. Because it just would have kept you moving.
No, I was going to say I'd really be curious to hear the commentary of someone who's never seen the stage play or heard the music.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I am curious if watching it with fresh eyes would really hurt it or really help it.
So I didn't listen to a lot of reviews for this movie, but I listened to one where it was a few guys who, like, none of them had seen it or heard any of the music or don't, like, maybe kind of heard Defying Gravity, like, in passing.
Yeah.
And none of them really seemed to super like it either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I do think this is really for the fans, which apparently there are a lot of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that's not a bad thing, actually.
Insane how
I think
every theater was booked.
Yeah. Because this movie really, if anything, it needs to at least please the fans. Because if it did something that was really off canon, that brought in a whole bunch of.
People would have been so mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if a casual person or someone who doesn't know the musical really would have loved it, it would have really just destroyed that base that it already has.
You're right.
So I think in that sense, it really does deliver for who is intended it to be.
As someone who is a fan, it worked for me. So I feel like if you are a fan or if you love musicals, which I love musicals, then you will probably like this movie.
Yeah. Apparently this was all sung live.
Yeah.
I was confused by that because I think you had mentioned that before I went to the movie.
Right.
It seems like it's just dubbed.
I think Defying Gravity might have been partially dubbed because she's like literally flying in the sky.
Everything from the very beginning when Glinda's kind of...
Popular felt like it was actually recorded in the space to me.
Really? I don't know.
But all the instrumental is not is dubbed over.
Okay. All of it sounded like or seemed like it was lip synced. Yeah, dubbed. Which I'm fine with. That's the norm, right? But then I was confused by the whole fact that everyone's going a little crazy about, oh, this was sung live. Does that just mean that they actually sung out loud? They sung
live in the set. Yes.
But the recording that we're hearing is still in a studio.
No, the recording, the way they were advertising it anyway, the recording is the one they did on set. I
don't believe that.
You think they're lying?
I do not believe that. When you watch it...
That's a lot of people to lie about something, though. That's a whole set of people.
It doesn't sound
They all signed
like
NDAs.
That. And they're like moving and turning. We got a
new conspiracy theory.
I mean, when just singing and dancing.
Yeah.
Which I've danced in the past on stage, but...
Ooh, roll the clip!
Not professionally, but for high school, right? And knowing how hard it is to sing and dance to those levels...
it is Broadway singers do it every day,
which is why it's so amazing when we hear it done live.
Yeah,
but on screen, it doesn't sound like the voice is taking any kind of hit from having to do both.
Well, I think what they do is they do like 100 takes, and then they do the best takes and mash them together.
I don't believe it. Hot take, but I think probably what happened was they dubbed it. They were lip syncing. In the final, it's just the studio track that we're hearing that's recorded. But they probably just sang out live for real on set to make it convincing. That's what I'm guessing. Yeah.
Maybe. It is
But
really hard to match lip syncing to
because I
real
think there were
singing,
times
though.
when it seemed off. Let us know what you thought. Yeah, if you guys are more 4.0 or higher or 3.0 or lower.
I gave it a heart because I'm planning on watching it again.
4.5? 4.5?
You know, it's not.
I'm challenging your rating, but everything you said.
It's not perfect enough.
Okay. You recognize a little bit of the flaws.
Yeah, I recognize some flaws. There were some things that I was annoyed by. It wasn't like over the edge. It wasn't Dune Part 2.
It just kind of delivered what you expected really well.
It
but
did
it
what
didn't
I
blow
wanted.
your mind.
It did what I wanted.
Yeah.
It demonstrated the musical well. Characters were great. But there were a couple things that I was like, why did you do that? Weird choice. CGI, bleh, you know.
Got it. Okay. Well, let us know what you think. And you can follow us on
YouTube, Letterboxd, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I always forget that one.
Yeah. And next week, we are going to be reviewing Moana 2. So before next week, if you get a chance, rewatch Moana, which I have to rewatch to kind of refresh, and go watch Moana 2. And
Sweet.
Join us next Thursday as we continue our quest for the 5th star.